we're going to get started just to prove it's us. We're going to be very confusing. We're going to do number 3 first. So, Ms. Farag, if you could please explain that to us.
Hi, it's Susan Farag, Council staff. Good afternoon, everybody. We are taking things out of order. We're going to do it a little bit weird in the interest of time. The first item will be number 3, which is Prisoner Medical Services, NDA. They have currently recommending a budgeted amount of $20,000. This is pro forma. The police have to pay whatever medical costs are incurred by people who are in their custody. We pay it. This is basically just a placeholder, recommending approval as submitted.
And I have no problem with it. My only question on that one is, if possible, do we bill insurance or Medicare or something if we can? How does that work?
I believe that if the individual has...
You're going to need to come forward, Neil. Thanks. If we'd have known the audience was going to answer, we'd have done...
That's what happens.
Yeah, that's right. We have somebody, that's right. And it was then pointed out, that's what happens when I go out of order. That's my fault. Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Neil Shore, Management and Budget Director, Police. It is my understanding that when we have the circumstance where they're in custody, but they're not under the custody of DOCR, that we do when we can. I will tell you, in many cases, the individuals do not have that type of insurance.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Unless there's any objection, that's approved 2-0. Okay? Thank you. And then what we're going to do to just continue the confusion, Councilmember Rice is here because of a police, a matter on the police budget for the SROs, the school resource officers, and I know he wanted to speak to that, but we're going to let you speak at that, and then we'll bring it back up afterwards. Okay?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate your allowing me to come and talk about an issue that I know is important to all of you, just like it is to me, and that is our School Resource Officer Program. I would ask that at a later date, I would hope that we might be able to do a joint committee meeting between Public Safety and our Education and Culture Committee surrounding the future of our School Resource Officer Program to give a more robust discussion about this, and instead of approaching this from a piecemeal perspective, which I know is a challenge to Office of Management Budget, as well as to our school system and our police department. But I know that it's incredibly important for us as we value the security of our schools to make sure that we continue to provide more officers that are going to provide support for a lot of our children. And so our School Resource Officer Program that has been storied in terms of its success, our School Resource Officer Program, and one in which I actually saw Councilmember Hucker at my last visit. I've been meeting with our school resource officers, and I was at Montgomery Blair High School with our school resource officer there. I had a great time with them talking about the issues that our schools are facing, are doing a tremendous job. And so I really want to thank our Department of Police. They don't get enough credit and accolades, and so let me tell you, your officers in our schools are doing a tremendous job of being resources. They don't see them necessarily as police officers, they see them as resources. A child who was concerned that they might get jumped after school, talking to the school resource officer and averting an incident that may have spilled not only from just a school-wide incident, but then potentially into the neighborhood. And we know what happens when those kinds of things happen are incredibly important. You'll never be able to quantify those. You'll never be able to get all of those on paper and say, see what we prevented. But we know anecdotally that they happen. I hear about them all the time. And in the days in which I spend time with our school resource officers, I actually see them. I've seen everything from credit card theft and use of credit card numbers, and this is all just in one day. Folks, I mean, the myriad of things that our schools are dealing with, and our school security, thank you for them for being partners. But Mr. Chair, I was ad-libbing enough until Councilmember Hucker got here. And so,
Chicago, good.
Yeah, exactly. I would have had to keep on going on the praises of the School Resource Officer Program. But I'd like to propose, I'd like to propose that we just add 2. We added 3 on the reconciliation list last year that we ended up funding. This will actually give us the ability to have 1 middle school resource officer inside of each of our school clusters. And so then that way, it will give us the ability to have them go around to each of the individual middle schools within that school boundary. So, for each of the different 5 school districts that we have, it will enable them to go around to each of those middle schools. I think it's a great way for us to start a foundation of how we then can look at expansion from there with a future meeting between education and culture and public safety. So that would be my request.
And I look forward to meetings on that, just on this one topic, because we're going to get back to corrections. But just on this one topic, Chief, do you have any comment on this?
I just want to echo what Councilmember Rice was saying. So earlier today, a school resource officer up near where you and I live stopped me and just started talking to me about some stuff going on in the school. Then said, look, can you come by and sit with a bunch of the kids and just talk one day? Just about what the police department's supposed to do, what they're doing, the importance of policing in our community. Because he felt that it's important for them just to hear it sitting down in a stairwell, in a classroom, out on the bleachers, wherever. And I said, sure, you set it up, I'll come out there. But that school resource officer, he's doing that every day.
Yeah.
And they're all doing that every day. And so we talk about community policing. This just all ties in incredibly important work being done by these school resource officers that we can't measure. I can't come up here and put a graph on it. I can't put numbers to it. But you know what? I know it when I see it. I've been doing this a long time, and it works. It's critically important. Thank you for recognizing it. And it's them. It's not me. It's not the folks sitting behind me. It's those school resource officers that are out there right now.
Right.
Past their time they're supposed to be off, still doing it.
There you go. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
We'll get back to it on the next area, but thank you. Okay. Well, you can talk to Inspector, you can talk to Corrections Department.
Just got comfortable?
Yeah, wow. See, Rob is a team player. See that? Yeah, okay. Anyhow, Susan, with the first topic that we're actually going to have, I guess it's now the second topic, is the operating budget for the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Would you like to lead us through it, please?
And I'd like to further the confusion by asking if we talk about the WorkSource Montgomery piece last, because it
Okay.
might go a little longer if we can get the rest of this stuff discussed first, if that would be okay with you.
Absolutely.
The overall budget recommended for FY20 for corrections is about $70.7 million. That's an increase of almost $5 million, or 6.8% from the FY19 approved budget. I've divided this into some staffing issues and operational issues. I was very happy to see, similarly to the fire department budget, there have been a number of budget structural deficiencies that have been addressed throughout the department's budget this year. For staffing, the recommended budget includes 535 full-time positions. That's a reduction of 3 positions from last year's approved personnel complement. As you know, the department's experienced very deep staffing cuts during the recession, particularly in FY10 and FY11, and it lost approximately 50 positions at that time. In FY09, for comparative purposes, staff totaled 562 full-time positions and 6 part-time positions. After several council-initiated restorations in 13 and 14, staffing increased incrementally to its current approved complement, although this is still well below pre-recession levels.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second on that? Do we know what, and if somebody, I should have let somebody know this question, but what the population of the jail was in FY09 versus what it is today? In '09 it was higher? Yes. Okay.
The incarcerated population in detention service. Robert Green, Director of the Department of Corrections. It was higher in '09 with the incarcerated population inside detention services. When you look at the total population under supervision today, we're at 2,163, which is a similar number, but just in very different places. With justice reinvestment, bail reform, and other activities, our population has shifted, thus kind of what we're doing with staffing as well. But they were higher in the incarcerated facilities of confinement, MCDC, MCCF, and the pre-release center.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Susan, please.
Over the past several years, the county has been suffering some budget constraints. In order to meet the targeted budget reductions each year, the department's been required to take more and more laps, which has constrained hiring, although all the essential posts have been covered, and Mr. Green makes sure of that every year. I've just laid out on page 3 a chart about the amount of laps that DOCR has had to take for the past several fiscal years. This year, the recommended budget includes an additional $1.2 million to actually reduce that lapse, and it'll give them more flexibility as far as being able to hire positions. There are two positions that are going to be abolished. One's a maintenance officer position, and the other is a supply officer position. The executive advises that Department of General Services will assume this work for the maintenance officer through a standard work order process. Eliminating this position will allow the department to place all correctional officers in security posts to support minimum staffing patterns, and a security escort will be provided on an as-needed overtime basis for all work that has to be done. As far as the supply officer position, they currently have 2 supply officers, and the department will eliminate 1 position and shift the hours of the remaining officer to cover the peak demand from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Most supply and inmate property functions can be completed during those hours. There's also a request to reduce security staff at pretrial services from 2 to 1 officer for savings of about $87,000. This was a big issue several years ago when pretrial release was located on Ardennes. And they had front waiting area lobby concerns about security and people waiting around and making sure that everybody was in a safe environment. So there was a lot of work done. The council had restored a correctional officer for that. However, as you know, pretrial has been relocated to Neville Street with the pre-release and reentry program, and it's completely different now. And the department says that it can handle security. They've got other security measures in place, like lockers for property, and they have got the metal detectors, and they have a person who staffs the front desk. The next addition is for a tuberculosis nurse, a TB control nurse. Historically, HHS has provided this to the MCCF up in Clarksburg. The state grant for this position was significantly reduced this year, and it resulted in HHS losing 2 TB nurse positions. The recommended budget provides general funds to provide and maintain this position. And I'd like you to skip over WorkSource Montgomery, which is the next several pages, over to page 6, which is dealing with some other structural budget deficiencies. The next one is for adjusting medical expenses, adding $430,000. DOCR provides constitutional level of medical care to inmates, but it continues to experience significant growth in the acuity across both the medical and the mental health care areas, and that's led to increases in outside physician consultations, increased pharmaceutical costs, and various other treatments and supplies. It's also required to increase clinical hours from a contractual physician or nurse practitioner to supplement the regular services provided. Also, an adjustment in the food budget, adding $300,000. DOCR has 3 full-service kitchen facilities that are serving 2,200 inmate and resident meals each day. They also serve correctional officers. And while the department actively works to purchase food at the best prices possible, it does adhere to certain nutritional guidelines, including the Children Nutrition Program. They've indicated that while the CPI for certain foods has increased well over 30% in the past 10 years, their food budget has not kept up at all. For electronic monitoring, there's an extra $98,000 this year. They use electronic monitoring both in pretrial and pre-release programs. They currently have 768 individuals in pretrial supervision, and approximately 10 to 12% of them are receiving the electronic monitoring services. The total budget for this item this year will be $367,000, and the additional $98,000 better aligns with actual expenditures. The next item is substance abuse testing kits for $135,000. This is the same level of funding as last year. Last year, however, for targeted savings, it was shifted over to the drug enforcement forfeiture fund, and now it's coming back, so it's showing an increase in costs. They complete pre-release and reentry services completes about 14,000 drug tests per year, and pretrial release, including the IPSA program, completes over 15,000 drug tests per year. In response to the ongoing opioid crisis, fentanyl testing has been implemented. That was implemented in December for pretrial, pre-release, and drug court participants. The programs also use multi-drug tests that are more expensive than the single drug tests, and the costs for those range from $2 to $3.60 per kit. The alcohol test cost averages about $10 per test, and the synthetic drug testing for K2 Spice costs about $35 per test kit. There is a reduced library cost this year for almost $16,000. The department manages an inmate advisory council fund for inmates. This fund originates from profits within the commissary program, and the profits from those purchases are required to be held in a trust by the county to benefit inmates. This fund generates about $180,000 a year, and the current balance is $472,000. This item is shifting library costs to that fund for a savings. Finally, there's a changes in medication administration for a savings of $170,000. The department's worked with its contracted pharmacy to move from a single administration dosing for HIV drugs to a multiple dosing regimen. This is still consistent with U.S. Department of Health and Human Services guidelines for providing HIV therapy. However, going to this multiple dosing regimen is reducing costs. And now if you would like to turn back to WorkSource Montgomery, which is on page 4. And I did attend the Fed/ENC meeting this morning regarding this item. It's my understanding that that joint committee wanted to transfer $50,000 of WorkSource Montgomery NDA funds to the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation's budget. And there's also a question about a I'm sorry?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. And there's also a half-time position out in the community for $35,000, which is currently funded by WIOA funding. There is a discrepancy in what we're being told between the department and WorkSource Montgomery as far as what the function of this position is. And I can start by giving you a broad overview of the WorkSource Montgomery program and why it's important, and then what the program used to be in 2017 and what it is now with WorkSource Montgomery involvement, if that would be helpful to the committee.
I'm fine to do that. Are you okay to do that?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay. WorkSource Montgomery has a program with they help staff American Job Centers. There's been an American Job Center within the jail, I believe, for 13 years. And there are 2 out in the community right now, one in Wheaton and one in Germantown. And what this does is provide WorkSource work training, employment training, the skills necessary for a person who is currently incarcerated to be gainfully employed when they get out. They have a great program inside. They learn everything from resume writing skills, application process, how to do an interview. Probably most critically, though, is how do they answer interview questions to explain why they have a criminal record and, you know, what's been happening in jail. How have they been able to better themselves within the jail's programming? But this program has really depended on what they're calling a warm handoff to people out in the community. And without that, it's a scaffolded approach. Without that, if they lose contact with these individuals, it's going to be hard to really get them employed and keep them employed. You know, they have a much different need base than what a regular job seeker has. They've got a lot more things that they need to deal with, and there are specialized programs that specially train people, and the 2 people who are working in the jail right now are certified offender workforce development specialists and offender employment retention specialists. And that's what's missing right now out in the community. So there used to be, and if you'll turn to circle 18 of my packet, there is an organizational chart of what the program used to look like. And it used to have a half-time position at each of the outside community-based American Job Centers who would receive ex-offenders as they came out of jail and helped them with their community placement in employment. According to this department, those positions and that service function is no longer being provided by WorkSource Montgomery. So, Chairman Katz asked the County Attorney Mark Hansen for a ruling because this has also been a discrepancy. Whether or not federal WIOA funds can be used to fund any of these positions, particularly the positions within the jail. And we have a ruling from the county attorney that indicates, yes, they can be used all through, and that the governor has a lot of latitude in order to designate who qualifies for these federal funds. And he has specifically stated that offenders incarcerated, as well as ones who have just left, qualify for the use of these funds. So it's my recommendation that the committee take a look at how they can make sure that these 2 new positions exist out in the community-based AJCs, and that they are appropriately trained to be able to function well and have results as far as getting people employed and retaining employment.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice, did you have a comment?
I actually did, Mr. Chair, and I really thank you again for your deference in letting me speak about this. We just had this discussion upstairs with our joint Fed and EC about this topic, and we did shift because we wanted to make sure that we went back to the model that was there pre-2017. It's interesting that I had asked the director, Director Green, about when a change in the efficacy of the program happened, and it was once this new model that didn't have the things associated with the warm handoff and the support structure that was there were no longer in place. And so I know this program that was once lauded by our Secretary of Labor and our Attorney General of the United States was absolutely amazing, and we've eroded some of that efficacy by taking away these positions and restructuring it. We need to build it back up the way it was before, and so I just wanted to let you know that we tried to do our part. We're instructed that some of it needed to come through the Public Safety Committee, and so we certainly support fully building that back up and adding those 2 positions to ensure that there's warm handoff. We also did talk, just so you know, about constructing an MOU because we want to make sure that although these funds still go to WorkSource Montgomery, that we need to be very explicit about what our expectations are when it comes to what we want to see happen. And so we'll be hopefully having our joint staffs work together with your leadership on this committee and leadership from Fed and EC to make sure that that happens, and working, of course, obviously with our partners that are at our correctional facility. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, and thank you. I think all of us have been very, very concerned about what has happened here. I mean, it's really just not what we wanted, and the people that need to be served are not being served, and that's not good for anybody, whether they're when they're incarcerated and when they're out. So I don't know, and Director, I don't know if you would like to comment as well, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't know what's the best path forward, but I do know that we need to change dramatically from what has happened, and I think we need to do it quickly. One of the questions that I have is that can the 3 positions that are in that are now being staffed in the center, in the correctional facility, can they actually go into a base budget for the county, and then we charge back or get WIOA funds through that?
Well, there is 80,000 of the pot of money that I knew about was 130,000. That's $80,000 general funds, which is already in the corrections budget. And then there was 50,000 that WorkSource Montgomery had. They'd been using a state grant. It was initially supposed to be a 1-year state grant. They somehow got it for 2 years, but it's gone after this year. And they're supposed to use other WorkSource Montgomery NDA funds in order to continue to provide that service within the jail. There is a half-time vacant administrative aide within the jail that hasn't been filled for several years. And then there's the 2.5s out in the community that would be the ideal staffing model. Since WIOA funds can be used in the jail, according to our county attorney, they should be able to access those fundings for these positions. We could propose written language in the budget resolution dealing with the WorkSource Montgomery NDA that WorkSource Montgomery must apply and provide these funds for these positions to the extent possible. And I can work with Gene Smith on that.
Well, but according to the packet, there's 2 the full-time staff that are actually contract rather than county employees.
If Mr. Green could explain how they invoice and pay for those.
Robert Green, Director of Corrections. We have 2 staff that are contracted inside the jail under WorkSource Montgomery, and they contract to another entity to provide a private vendor to provide those 2 positions, and that's the structure that we have now. So that $80,000 we can transfer, or we invoice, can be invoiced by WorkSource Montgomery to assist in the payment of those positions, but that $80,000 does not cover the 2 positions that we currently have inside doing the base level work that was described by Ms. Farag.
So with Susan, and we're going to hear from the other members of the committee, but from what we have now, how quickly can we get this thing straightened out? How quickly can this be done?
I don't know the answer to that for you. Let me talk to Gene Smith about it, and we'll get an answer to all 3 committees.
Okay, that's good. Did you all want to?
What was the reason given for the adjustment in programming by WorkSource? Was it discussed in the session this morning?
So,
Go ahead, please. You became the instant expert. Go ahead.
WorkSource Montgomery said there was a loss during the transition there was a lack of communication and positions were lost. And there was testimony from the department that that was not necessarily the case.
Would you have been that diplomatic?
No, I would not have been, which is why I let Susan do it. I was already very undiplomatic this morning, so I decided to let Susan take.
Huh, I'm shocked that you were undiplomatic this morning. Yeah, but so I think we're all in agreement that we want to get this thing straightened out as quickly as possible, the best way and the fastest way, and
Your
come back with
intent
this.
to try to fund the 3 positions, the half-time aide within
Yep.
the jail, and the 2 part-time positions that are the warm handoff.
Yep,
And we'll determine the best way to do that, likely using WorkSource Montgomery funds.
yep. Yeah, and you're all okay with that too? Good? Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I mean, keep in mind, we already alleviated some of the work from WorkSource Montgomery by switching and giving that money directly to Department of Corrections. So it makes it a lot easier for it to be streamlined in terms of, what needs to happen from here. So, they still have $35,000 that they originally had in WIOA funds that was supposed to go to this. So, certainly adding a bit more to add for the additional staffing should not be an issue within the context of their $1.8 million. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Susan, or?
That's it for the corrections budget. We're recommending the rest of the budget be approved as submitted.
Okay. Inspector Green, and Director Green. Was there a cartoon character? I don't know. Go ahead, please, yeah.
I don't want to run past the moment to allow everyone at the table to introduce themselves. If I could, start with Warden Maligari.
Please.
Susie Malingary, Warden, Detention Services.
Okay.
Kate Beckley with Management Services over budgeting.
Good afternoon, Angela Talley, Division Chief Community Corrections.
Good afternoon.
Tony Sturgis, I'm the Chief of Medical and Behavioral Health Services.
Rachel Silverman, OMB.
Thank you very much. Did you have anything?
We are very supportive, appreciative of the executive's budget. The realization of the deficiencies and the lapses that we have will go a long way in helping our department meet our budget and help us as we continue to grow and evolve. You ask a very direct question about the population. I mean, we're a population of 2,163 today. Significantly changed those which are incarcerated and potentially those that are under pretrial supervision. In Ms. Talley's division, Community Corrections, we're managing today about 67% of the entire pretrial population of Montgomery County, which is just incredible. So it's one of the largest pretrial programs, if not the largest, and it is the largest in the state of Maryland. So we appreciate the Executive Elrich's realization and Chief Administrative Officer Klein and their impact on this budget. And we're here to answer your questions. We fully support it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No, I'm grateful, as usual, for all your good work. Very much support the executive's budget. And Warden Maligari, I wanted to thank you for, on behalf of DCDBH, for your intergovernmental service regarding the 17-year-old that was arrested at Howard University Hospital, was a Prince George's resident with a 1-week-old baby and multiple vulnerabilities. And I heard great work from DCDBH staff about your responsiveness, and it was my wife that works there. So she was very impressed with your responsiveness. Thank you for that important case.
Thank you. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that, Susan, in the future, we certainly can't do it today, but I would like to see what we can do to bring back, I think it was called the Sweet Release. It was a bakery program that was at the, and to see how much it would cost and what it would take and all of the things necessary. I believe the more training we can have inside keeps people from going inside. So.
I'll work with the department and find out what that'll require.
Okay. And just as a note at the very end of this, Director Green, we sincerely appreciate all of your hard work and all of your great effort, and you will be greatly missed in Montgomery County. Truly, the state's gain is their loss. Yep. And you certainly have done a wonderful, wonderful job. We're not going to throw away your phone number, I can tell you, and we're going to keep in touch, and hopefully you will do that with us as well. And I wanted to congratulate Angela Talley, who is going to be serving as the acting director as well. We look forward to working with you, and you, as you know the job as well, that you have some big shoes to fill. He had some big shoes to fill too when you got this job. So, but we're here for you, and we appreciate all that you do, and for all those who you serve. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for doing that. And yeah, this is a deep bench, and the men and women of the Department of Corrections are an incredible team. You know, when we say best in corrections, they're an incredible group of people. It's been an honor to be here with you. And but this work continues and will grow and evolve, and there are great things to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, the next item that we have is the police. And we're going to ask that panel to please join us.
Wave's calling. He's having some kind of problem with one of his kids. So that's why he's out of here. Yeah, but
We'll work through this. It's been that kind of day.
And which the speaker is.
Good. Strange.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all for allowing us to be flexible here this afternoon. And Susan, if you would like to lead us off, please.
Sure. For FY20, the recommended budget for the police department is $295 million. That's a 5.43% increase from the FY19 approved budget. I've got staffing issues laid out for you for your consideration at first. I've got several moving parts on the staffing piece. They have an authorized sworn complement of 1,305 officers. That includes 12 new positions that were added during FY18 by the council and 4 new positions added in FY19. There are no new police officer positions added for FY20. So the pattern is they've gotten nobody new recommended by the county executive for several years now. What has been added has been added by council, and again, we've got Councilmember Rice's request for 2 new additional SROs. I'm trying to get some information to figure out what the staffing needs are within the department. I don't have any more than what has come across the street, but so I don't know if they need additional ones, is what I'm trying to say, up and above. I do want to talk about the recruit class, though. The recruit class will address attrition, and again, no new positions. The recruit classes are scheduled for 2 this year, 22 candidates each. There is an attrition projection chart on Circle 17 for your information. These are very small classes. This is what they had last year too, but it's very small classes compared to what they've had historically. And there has been a little bit of trouble filling these classes in the past couple of classes, and which is the reason I was given why they're small this year. However, they are aggressively and proactively recruiting to try to fill up to about 37 for the summer class. And if they're successful, it would be helpful to get a status update of where they are on that right now. But if they're successful in that, and if they wanted to fill a winter class, there's no real funding available for that. And I've been told that Office of Management and Budget would come over with a requested supplemental appropriation. And I believe that's for about $1.9 million if everything went right. And I have some initial reservations about that. Because it's such a large supplemental appropriation. We've had so many budget constraints over the past several years. Don't really know what the revenue situation is going to be like moving forward into FY20 and FY21. So I do have concerns about that. If they really need these positions, do we need to fund them up front? So the department can talk a little bit about that. On page 4, I've got a slightly outdated and confusing chart about vacancies at the different district stations. The authorized complement was based off what I was given last year. I unfortunately asked for updated information very late, so I don't know if the department has information on that for you today. The The vacancies are based on a vacancy run that I've seen, so I also don't know if those are exactly accurate. So if the department does not have updated information, then I guess do not take this under consideration at all. But I did want to put that out in case people had concerns about vacancies around the county. Again, I indicated on recruit class sizes, the fact that they are small classes, and if they do upload on the summer class, what's going to happen with the winter class. I have a breakdown on page 4 of the costs if you choose to add police officers on the reconciliation list. If you choose to add them to the summer class, it's $165,000, and the winter class is $61,000 total. That's because it's only half a year, and the vehicle that they would get, the personal patrol vehicle, would be budgeted later in FY21, and they can be around $50,000. As you spoke to Councilmember Rice earlier, he's requested two school resource officers. The cost of that would be $122,000 with the assumption they'd be added to the winter class. And I didn't know now if the police department had any update on recruitment or the vacancies at the different department districts around
Well,
that.
before we do that, if the panel could please identify themselves, please.
Dinesh Patel, the Acting Assistant Chief for the Management Services Bureau.
Good afternoon, Dave Anderson, the Assistant Chief for Field Services Bureau.
Good afternoon, Marcus Jones, Assistant Chief of the Investigative Services Bureau.
Neil Schwab, Director of Management and Budget Division.
Rich Harris, Office of Management and Budget.
Very good. Chief, please.
Russ Hamill, Acting Chief of Police for right now. So if I could start with just thank you all for taking the time to hear us out on this budget. I know there's a lot of questions, and we welcome the opportunity to discuss this here in public. I'll also be remiss if I didn't thank my staff. Imagine the trouble they had getting me ready for this in a month.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
I do want to really, I'd be remiss if I didn't
imagine.
note the hard work of the staff here to help get us ready for this in this transition time.
And I think it should be noted, though, you've certainly been to budgets many, many times. This is actually your first budget for you as a acting chief.
Yes,
So,
sir.
yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge, we will always take more people. We could always use more cops, more civilians to help us do what we do, but we understand the bigger picture of the budget. Yes, our mission's critical. You look at the response to the quadruple shooting with the homicide in Germantown recently. You look at just over the weekend when a couple of our officers went into a pond and pulled a child out of a pond. That was a critically dangerous situation. Corporal Santos grabs a couple young officers and goes into a residence in Germantown, saves 5 people who are being held hostage there. Just 2 weeks ago, and that was going to be worse than what it was. So we absolutely critical to public safety, what these officers, what our folks are doing out there, and absolutely critical to having a thriving, safe community. But what's going on over at libraries, what's going on over at HHS and schools and recreation, that's critical to a safe community too. So we understand, we work together, to make the county better. We also understand the budget limitations. We don't print the money here in Montgomery County, at least the last time I checked. So we try to
That
manage.
would actually be illegal if we did.
Yeah.
It's like that.
But we try to manage our budget and keeping an eye on the overall budget. So I will say this, our budget is a reality-based budget for what we have to do in these times that we're facing now. As for recruiting, so it was mentioned that this current class is a couple officers shy. I'm going out to the roll calls and I'm discussing a lot of things with the officers in the districts right now and other assignments. And that's noted, that we left 4 seats empty. Wasn't at that point for a lack of applicants. It was for a lack of people that I want to put on the street working with the officers we have out here serving. I'm not going to fill seats, and Assistant Chief Patil is on the same page with me right now. We're not going to fill seats with people unless they should be here for the right people we want serving this community, the right people you want serving this community. So I don't want the idea being that we intentionally did that for some other reason, that we did it for laps. We didn't do it for that. We did it because we wanted the right people in the seats. That being said, recruitment and retention is difficult across the country. Most major departments are facing a 2/3 or about 65% reduction in applications. We're not quite that bad, but we're pushing that. Applications are down, and you look no further than the public rhetoric about policing, what families are encouraging or not encouraging their kids to do. I teach law at the University of Maryland, criminal justice program. It used to be nearly every hand in my class would go up, they want to be cops. Now, that is severely diminished, but they're still majoring in criminal justice. It's a changed dynamic for us. All that being said, we plan on filling 37 seats in this next class that comes in August. We plan on filling 37 seats in the next class in January behind that. Our recruiting staff, our background staff, the entire personnel section, they understand this is mission critical for the future success of this police department and the future safety of this community. We know what our drop numbers look like. We know our attrition rate outside of the drop numbers. We know some people go on the drop and they don't stay the full time. We are cognizant of all that. Our recruiting efforts, we've changed the page in recruiting over the past couple of months. We're doing, for instance, Captain Augustine and Captain Kokinos are going to, I'm not going to say what they're going to do because we're on TV and I don't want another department to take it, but they're going to do some pretty innovative things in recruiting over this summer. We just did something where we actually went to the University of Maryland. We're doing it this weekend. We're going to the University of Maryland and we're giving a test. Rather than making them come all the way out here on public transportation, we're taking the test to them in order to encourage more to come in and take the test to make it easier for them. The days of an ad on the back of a bus or a truck, this generation doesn't even pay attention to that anymore. So we're deep into social media and not just one shot into it. We are heavy into social media, constant contact, and encouraging people to recruit. So they understand what their goal is. And I will say this, and this will probably jinx this, but unusually for what we do in the police academy, everybody that we hired to start the academy is still there.
Wow.
At this stage. Normally we lose a couple very early on. Every person we put in there. So I think that demonstrates we kind of hit the right people there.
Yep. It's impressive.
We will make our mark. They are recruiting heavy. We'll make our mark. So I would anticipate you will be coming back over here to get those extra seats filled, and that's important for what we're going to do.
And to that degree, Susan, are you suggesting that we put in a 1.9 million tranche? What are you?
It's hard to tell with recruitment up in the air. Like I said, they're aggressively trying to fill this class and they want to fill the next class, of course. If you wanted to add police officers, I suggest breaking it down into several tranches of funding.
Okay, and how many is several? How many would you?
I would do at least three. If you fill 37, I didn't bring my calculator with me. What's left for the winter class?
Well, you right now you have in this budget 44, right?
Right.
So in 37, so you'd have 7 from what we've already in, so it's about 30 people.
30, yes.
Yeah, so it'd be whatever it would be for, if we did 3, it would be whatever it would be for 10 people.
Mm-hmm. I was going to suggest at least one tranche of 10, yeah.
Well, why don't we, to me, if we did the 3, and who knows, we can come off the reconciliation list, I don't want to give any false hope here, but if we do the 3, at least we would have the ability to to come up with at least 1 or maybe 2 from this. Go ahead. Okay.
I just wanted to be clear about that. Adding these police officers does not increase the sworn complement size, correct? It would only address attrition at this point. It would just make sure that the class sizes were ideal for attrition purposes.
Yeah, and we have to do that. Right. I mean, as long as we can recruit. So you're okay with that?
I am.
And then for the SROs, I'm certainly fine with 2, but the question is, should we do that in more than one tranche?
They'd be 61,000 each. I think the size 122,000 is just fine, but I don't want to speak for Mr. Rice whether or not he would be okay if only one were accepted, if that makes sense.
Where are you on that?
It's going to be an interesting reconciliation list.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I'm fine adding it for now. And yeah, it might be, since he's not here, I don't know, maybe it's more consistent with his
Stay at the
wishes
122.
to keep it that way, and then if he wants to break it up, I imagine we always could.
Okay.
In reconciliation, right?
Okay.
If it was strategically more.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's do the 1 tranche for the SROs.
Just so we're clear on SR, so the ones that went into the 3 that are in the current budget,
Right.
they won't be out of the police academy and through field training till Dinesh, September, we field training?
Yeah, this fall for sure.
Right.
I'd have to look to the dates,
So-
but this fall, by the time they,
Isn't just throwing a switch, but what we can do is, as school approaches, the assistant chiefs can work out maneuvers to make sure we're covered.
And in this case, that's another thing. The fact that we would hire now doesn't mean that somebody hits the street tomorrow morning. I mean, it takes time to get you there. So that's why we really need to be much more literally proactive than what we've been. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Do you want-
Well, just, I mean, as long as we're on this topic, I know I've heard, and I imagine you have, Mr. Chairman, from members of the community, certainly in our area, that, let me start at the beginning. I've heard from so many residents for so many of the last 4 years, met with 3D Commander Jones, when he was 3D Commander Jones, about the number of vacancies all over the 3rd District, and now it's reduced to, a little, and that's welcome news, but I'm nervous about getting that number creeping back up if we don't do this. And I've heard from so many individual residents in neighborhoods and so many business owners and so many community leaders, civic associations and others who are asking for just more visibility and more bodies on the street. And I want to honor that because we have a lot of pressure on Silver Spring in particular, and we're going to have larger developments getting built in White Oak and elsewhere, and they're going to need to be policed. And I've also heard from, especially following the Robert White shooting, some members of the community who think, well, until we get better police transparency and accountability, we can't be increasing the police budget. And to me, that makes no sense whatsoever. The two things don't have anything to do with each other. I was glad that you all are working with us on that legislation and other transparency and accountability measures. And the last thing you do, to me, to get more police accountability and transparency is make neighborhoods suffer and make crime increase. That's nonsense to me. So I'm going to continue to just try to work with members of the community that to make that dichotomy clear. I think the two things don't have anything to do with each other, and we don't get more transparency and accountability by cutting your budget. Chief?
So if you look at some of our current budget requests, and so I might be jumping around on you here, but let me.
Well, we did it, why can't you?
So if you look at the IT specialists, we're asking to convert a contract employee into a full-time position and create yet another full-time position. So that's for the body-worn camera redaction program, which is about transparency. It is about communication with the community. It's about accountability for our officers. So that increasing that part of the budget helps that as well. If you go over to the in-car video systems, so we're still under, I know we have the body-worn cameras, but we're still under a DOJ agreement. And frankly, we want cameras in the cars and cameras on our officers. It gives us, and there's a lot of technology, and Chief Patil does not want me talking about technology at all because I'll make mistakes. But there's a lot of technology out there that helps us enhance our ability to be more transparent, which equals to better communication, better accountability. So we look at replacing 150 of the cameras on the Axon platform, which is what we're on right now, and so our body-worn cameras are going to be on the same platform as our in-car cameras. Replace 150, add 100. Transparency, accountability. On top of that, when you look at what we're doing with our interview rooms on the Axon platform, this system's going to be, I think, even bigger than we're imagining right now, and it helps the community, it helps the officers, and it provides for that stability, that 21st century policing accountability piece that we all discuss all the time. It provides for that in the department, but it costs money. Now, I would offer this. We've been a leader in community policing. We've been a leader in being transparent. We've been a leader in holding people accountable on our department across the board. But we're not just going to sit back and say, oh, look what we've done. We want to move forward and do better, and we're going to keep doing that. But as you said, it doesn't come free. It comes with a price tag on it. So we thank you for your support in that and helping us do that. And we're not tone deaf. We understand there's some members of the community right now that have some concerns. Well, let's demonstrate those concerns are unfounded by our actions and our accountability going forward. So, thank you.
Well, and to the whole idea for the body-worn cameras, I mean, it really is, and when someone says, you did this or you did that, and you can go back and say, well, here we are, I mean, to me, that's certainly something that's well worth whatever price tag is on it. And as you know, we've asked for an update on community policing after the budget. We can't be doing it right now, but after the budget, we're gonna let our public, remind our public about all that we're doing. So I'm fine with this. I mean, with what is being suggested. Any other?
Oh, I've got a lot more.
Okay.
Sorry. On page 5, I've got several other staffing changes. It's restoring 6 sworn police officer positions that had been lapsed in FY19. That was to hit targeted budget reductions. That was a savings last year of $1 million, so it's a increased cost of $1 million. But that reflects the cost of filling 6 police officer positions this year.
Right, and so that's already in this with the
Yes,
budget that was
that's-
sent across, so we don't have to add anything to
Nope,
that.
no.
Okay.
The next one is aligning the lapse budget to vacancies, which is a reduction of 1.6 million. And that's just revising the lapse based on projected vacancies for the year. The next item is police leadership service pay for performance. That was expedited bill 40-17, and that established a pay scale for police lieutenants and captains that's similar to the MLS. And it will cost $335,000 this year, and there are currently 58 lieutenants and captains in that in the PLS. Regarding civilian staffing, there's no new sworn positions, as we stated, included, but there are several non-sworn and contractual personnel changes. The forensic scientist for the crime lab would be an additional $83,000. The committee was briefed earlier, I believe in March, on the crime lab, and understanding the biology unit that there was a need to address the PERC testing backlog. And even though that they send these out to a different lab, there's a lot of case prep that has to be done for them and analysis. The IT specialist 2 position for the body-worn camera that Chief Hamill mentioned for redaction is $76,000. To add that, and then there are also current 3 conversions of contractual positions: a contractual GIS position to a merit staff position, a contractual redaction specialist to a county position, and a contractual school bus camera position to a county merit position. And it shows the different puts and takes there as far as costs go. Changing these from contractors to permanent staff has no substantive impact on the operations. As far as operational issues, Next Gen 911, there's an annualization cost of changes that were made last year for $717,000. That just reflects the full fiscal year costs for those changes. I did ask for an update on the Next Gen, and I see Mr. Ferretti's here. If you have any questions, that update is provided on page 6. I did want to mention, since it was brought up by Mr. Elrich and Ms. Navarro earlier in a press conference about the state legislation that impacts 911 fees and revenues. That's House Bill 397, or the Carl Hens Law, and it made several changes to the state's regulatory framework that govern the 911 system. Those changes were recommended by the State Commission to advance Next Generation 911 across Maryland. Mr. Ferretti served on that commission, and this bill encompasses several of those changes. And so what it will do, it has been enrolled, but it hasn't been signed by the governor yet, or at least it hadn't been as of yesterday. It will provide additional 911 fees and will therefore increase 911 revenues to all the counties, that all the counties will receive. So that will increase revenues for us to support our 911 system, thereby freeing up general funds to be used for some other purpose.
We've already spent, but anyhow, go ahead.
So I just wanted to put it out there in case anybody had any questions about that. The recommended budget for FY20 is $23 million. The county expects to receive $12 million from these new 911 revenues to help pay for these services, and that does reflect about a $5 million increase from last year. Again, that'll free up general funds that have historically been used to help to pay for the ECC and allow them to be used for other purposes. The in-car video system for $533,000. This reflects the cost of purchasing 150 replacement cameras and then 100 new additional cameras for patrol vehicles. The department is currently using Panasonic Arbitrator cameras. They're transitioning over to the Axon cameras under the same contract as the body-worn cameras and the cameras in interview rooms. And while the initial cost for transitioning over to the new vendor is slightly more expensive, over the course of 10 years, the department expects to realize about a $5 million savings, and there's a chart attached at Circle 16 that outlines how those savings are achieved. The next item is about $77,000, equipment for vehicles associated with new officers added in FY19 winter class. The motor pool fund contribution, NDA, also includes $123,000 for the new patrol vehicles associated with these same winter class recruits. That will be an additional cost for FY21 if you add these new officers to the winter class. A towing charge pass-through expense, this is kind of a technical adjustment. MCPD had allowed, they tow certain vehicles and they maintain an impound lot. And so when a vehicle owner comes to pick up their vehicle, they can pay both their citation and the towing fee directly to the police department. And then the department in turn remits payment for the towing to the towing companies with which they had contracted. And this revenue and expenditure had always netted out, but it had not been accounted for in the police department budget. So this change reflects actual expenditures, and while there are corresponding revenues are paid into the general fund, even though it's, puts and takes in different places, it continues to net out and it has no impact on police. The council staff's recommending approval of the rest of the budget as submitted.
Okay. And I'm fine with it as well, and I think we answered everything that we needed to answer. We sort of did it in such a disjointed way here, but I think everything got answered. I'm fine with the overall budget. Are you?
I'm fine with the budget. I'm grateful for Mr. Ferretti's work, and we're always glad to see more money coming back from Annapolis, especially for a good cause. And I know the school superintendent's happy with your work. And I'd spoken to both the Senate sponsor a little while back, and I saw the House sponsor this morning, and they both told me how much they enjoyed working with you on that bill. So thanks for all your good work.
Yeah, we echo that too. Might be the only time we've had a unanimous vote up here. So anyhow, but no, thank you very much, Bill. We appreciate it. It's going to be 2-0, and I have a feeling if Mr. Albanaz were here, it would be a 3-0. But anyhow, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you do the NDA already?
What did you say?
You did the NDA before I got here?
Yeah, we did that before. That took 2 seconds, and she wanted to do that to get it out of the way. It was so disjointed because Craig wanted to be here, and then you were late, and then Gabe.
The Bellway was just a total shutdown.
Yeah, perfect.
I left early.
Yeah, just perfect. Yeah.